questions, right?
Sorry, man, there was no audio. So just start again. Just say apologies for that.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Really sorry. I think there was no audio for the first part, but it should be working now. So just send in like a yes if you guys can hear me. Okay, perfect. So what I was saying is send in your questions. Welcome to another live, first and foremost. We're going to be, like I said, doing these every Thursday. So we have been. And this is another episode. So send in your questions, your dawah related questions, and we'll address them inshallah as we go along. And while you guys send in your questions, what I was saying was that I'm going to ask you guys a question and sort of share some of our dawah training inshallah during these lives as well and make it really practical for us. So the question I wanted to ask you guys today was, think about the most difficult, challenging, hard questions that you have been asked about Islam, whether it's at work, school, college, neighbors, whatever the case is, and send them in. And what I'll do inshallah is once we go through some of your answers that you send in, is we'll share with you a way of tackling this or dealing with this inshallah in the dawah, right? And the reason I want to start here or touch upon this specific area of our dawah training course is because this is the most difficult thing in the dawah for most people. For most people, they want to give dawah, they want to be involved in sharing the message of Islam, but just before they do that, this worry comes to their mind that, oh my God, what is going to happen if I get asked one of these difficult questions, right? One of these challenging questions, these uncomfortable questions. How will I tackle it? What would I say? You know, what would my answers be? And this frightens us, right? And then we don't give dawah. So if we can learn how to deal with all of these difficult, challenging questions, then essentially we're removing that barrier. We're removing the barrier between us and giving dawah. So send those challenging questions in, whatever they are, right? There's no wrong idea here or question or answer here. Just send in whatever you feel to be a challenging, difficult question about Islam, and then we'll go through them. Some of you guys may already know the answer or how to tackle this situation because you've done the dawah training course on training.iera.org. So we're not going to read your answer out. And if you do know the answer, don't send the answer in, right, straight away, because we want to see what questions come up, inshallah. So Jamal, let me know if anything has come through.
Where do we send questions? Someone asked.
In the comments, in the sort of live chat area. So on your YouTube, if you go on your phone, there should be a chat button at the bottom of the screen. And the same should apply to your PCs and computers as well. There should be a chat section. On the computer or PC should appear on maybe, I think it's on your right hand side where you can live chat. So it's the live chat option under this live stream, inshallah. So that's where you can send in your questions and you can send in your answers, inshallah. So hopefully that clarifies that for him, Jamal, inshallah. It's challenging questions, bro, we're talking about. Any challenging questions that come to your mind, Jamal, about Islam?
Not so much that there's challenging questions, but I know that people get nervous when they are about to when they're giving dawah.
Yeah.
They get very nervous that within that conversation something's going to happen where they think, I feel intimidated. I feel already, even before we started. And so it's about having that confidence that, obviously, you make dua and, you go to your training if you haven't had training and, just take your time and there's no rush because, if you take your time, inshallah, people will give you the time to explain yourself, inshallah. There's a question, I'm going to just post it up for you now, 1 second.
While you're doing that, bro, you're absolutely right. People get nervous, and I think one of the reasons is because they're afraid of dealing with these types of questions. The dreaded, as we refer to them or think of them, the dreaded questions. The uncomfortable stuff. But once you learn how to deal with it, then it's not a barrier anymore.
It's not a barrier, yes. Saeed Hassan, he's posted a question on there. Did the Prophet say there will be 73 sects and one will be right? So maybe that's a question that he's been asked during dawah.
Okay. So I'm not going to answer it if that's the case, or even try to answer it. We're just going to let the list come through, inshallah. There's ways, and we're not saying. So actually, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. So there's ways you can answer these questions, no doubt, right? But the question, the follow-up question is that the best thing to do? And that's what we're going to discuss, inshallah. Anything else that's come through?
So people, let me just check here. No, just comments.
So in regards to this generally, this is a narration of the Prophet ﷺ. But I think one thing we should take from this is that we should try to practice.
Here's another question here.
Okay. Yep, go on.
Haki Shanks, is your religion, if your religion is correct, why are there so many sects? That's what they're asking.
Okay, so it's linked.
It's a linked question.
All right. Okay. So there's several ways of addressing this. Firstly, Islam is one, right? Islam. When I say Islam, what we're saying is that Islam means submission to the will of God, and as Muslims, we are doing that, or we're trying to do that, which is submit our will to God. So Islam is one essentially. The revelation is one. The Quran is one. The message of Allah is clear. In regards to all of the things that we need to understand as human beings and we need to follow. Everything is outlined there. We have the Sunnah and the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ, which is there, the Hadith, which have been preserved as well. And we have what we refer to through these means, our deen, our way of life, which is Islam. Now, there are different, I wouldn't say, let's not get to the sects yet or the different subgroups, but there are different schools of thought, if you like, in regards to fiqh or, jurisprudence. There's different ways of, or slightly different ways of looking at certain practices of Islam based on the evidences that the scholars have studied, etc. So, and these aren't sects. You wouldn't call them sects necessarily. They're just scholars who have tried their best based on the evidences at hand to decipher, specifics, the nitty gritty of, as an example in the prayer, should you, raise your hands when you're praying in between, during the prayer, should you put your finger up during the prayer, etc. And all of these small, minute details. There are different views in regards to this. So there are different schools from this perspective. But that doesn't mean that this splits or divides Islam off into sects. However, that being said, that there are, you can say there are some sects or groups and some that have even gone out of the bounds of Islam. But Islam as a whole, which has been practiced by the majority of Muslims in the world, is one, right? And then when it comes to certain specific actions and duties and so on, there are different schools, and there is nothing wrong with ascribing to one school or the other school as long as you are within that sound framework of Islam, inshallah. So it is one. That's what I'm trying to get across. But based on the evidences, based on the way the scholars have studied these evidences, they have come to different opinions in regards to specific, minute matters. And there's nothing wrong in holding one opinion as opposed to the other in these regards. But when it comes to the core, the message, the essence of Islam, Tawheed, for example, the oneness of God, understanding that we have a creator, that he's uniquely one, that he created us to worship him, that is the purpose of our existence, that we will return to God, that there is nothing like God, that God is eternal. All of these core concepts, these fundamentals are same across the board. There's no issue in regards to those. So hopefully that addresses the question, inshallah.
Yeah,
Jamal.
okay. So there are a few questions that are coming in, but they're not really based around dawah. So just to remind everyone that this, all our lives are really focused on how we can develop our dawah.
Yeah.
People are asking questions and things like this. That's not what it's all about here. And inshallah, just remember, some of you who are da'is, maybe there's some questions that you can ask, which when Imran answers it could also educate everyone else as well, inshallah. And that's the whole point here, is how we can develop our dawah and get better at it.
Yeah.
And that's what these lives are all about, inshallah. So
Absolutely.
please post your questions, and inshallah we can really help each other.
And on those questions, so I gave you sort of a summary answer of that question, but generally speaking, now in the dawah, say you're giving dawah to a non-Muslim, right? And they ask you such a question, or they ask you something that's far more uncomfortable, something like, you Muslims force your women to cover. Why is there inequality in Islam? At least from their perspective, from the little that they know about Islam. You'll get uncomfortable questions like this, and there's many others. And I'm sure you guys are going to send the various sort of uncomfortable questions that are out there. But how should you address it in a dawah situation? Because the last thing you want to do is end up getting stuck in a conversation about a specific, minute detail within Islam, which is not significant or relevant to that non-Muslim at that point. It may be relevant to a Muslim, who's understood the foundations of Islam, who has accepted Islam, but for a non-Muslim who hasn't even acknowledged their creator or that they were created to worship him, these details are not relevant. They're not the most important thing, right? I always give the example. Imagine say you study the fiqh of fasting, yeah, and you're out giving dawah and you're speaking to a non-Muslim and he asks you about fasting. Now you can spend an hour discussing the minute details of how we fast, what we do, when we start, when we stop, all of these things. But if that's what you talk about and that non-Muslim leaves, no better off as far as the fundamental knowledge of Islam. Who is Allah? Why were they created? Who is the Prophet ﷺ? What is the Quran? They don't know any of these things. And they leave and they get hit by a bus on the way home. Have you left them in any better position than before you spoke to them? And the answer is no. Right? So there has to be a list of priorities. When it comes to the dawah to non-Muslims, there are some certain fundamentals that we need to speak about first. Right? And we're going to get into a bit more detail in regards to this. But any more questions, Jamal, before we do?
Just one from Muhammad Al-Hajj. He's asking, do we have a dawah team in the Baltic region?
There definitely is, I think, but I'm not the best person to know about that. I will have to. So, what was the brother's name? Muhammad.
Yeah, Muhammad.
So, brother Muhammad, if you're interested from the perspective of joining the team in the Baltic region, just send me an email. It's i.hussein at iERA.org. Sorry, I'm really tired, man. I don't remember my own email. i.hussein at iERA.org. Send me an email on that and I can get the information for you, inshallah, and we can get you linked up if there are any teams in that area. But as top of my head, I'm pretty sure there is, inshallah.
Also, we have a question from someone who's asking about the non-Muslim website, I think. The Dawah shop. So I think they're saying, are we still operating our Dawah shop? I think maybe it's just
our materials shop, online. It's still online. It's on the website, so you can go.
Having some difficulties. Maybe if you just send an email to info@iERA.org.
Yeah.
If you have any queries about anything not working, we can sort that out for you, inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah, all our materials are there, and they're free. All you'll have to pay for is the postage for them, inshallah. Or you can download them as PDFs and read them online, and that will be completely free, inshallah.
Okay, question here from Wilderness.
Okay, Aisha's age. I've heard new explanations. Her explanations that she was actually 18 or 19 years old. Yeah, there is that view as well. But see, this is good. Let me just finish the question before I answer half of it. It is, and I like to answer them. Yeah, so look, with questions like this, and no doubt this is one of those uncomfortable questions that people get asked, right? With questions like this, you'll be in two positions. Either you're going to be someone that knows how to address this question, meaning that you know that there's varying different opinions out there, or that you have some sort of intellectual way of highlighting that this is not really an issue. Or the other position is that you just don't know how to answer the question. And that's that. So look, if you're someone that knows how to address this question, you can address it. But the question I'm trying to get at, what I want you to think about is that addressing and answering these specific questions, are they the most important things for the non-Muslims at that point? Say in this case, that non-Muslim, you address this question, you answer this question, you articulate it really well, and they leave, and then the chances are they're not going to be satisfied, no matter how well you answer the question, right? Because based on their worldview, their paradigm, their perspective, their current modern understanding of age and the age of consent and all of this stuff, they may never be satisfied with the answer, right? But assuming you even do that, and they say they're not satisfied or whatever the case is, and they leave, and they still don't know who Allah is, why they were created, who the Prophet ﷺ was, what the purpose of life is, what the Quran is, etc. Are they leaving in any better position? So have we given them effective dawah? The answer is no, right? So what we're essentially getting at, what we say in our dawah training courses, these are important questions. Many of these are important questions. They're relevant questions. Sometimes you get crazy questions, but most of them are relevant. But if you put your dawah hat on, what you need to understand is that they're not at the top of the list of priorities. So what you can do is you can take these as opportunities to give these people dawah. How do you do this? This is the next question, okay? The best way to do this is what you do is first and foremost, you acknowledge the questioner and you say, thank you for asking me the question. This is a brilliant question. Thank you for asking me. Thank you for approaching me. And not just going to some, crazy anti-Islamic website online and looking at some, half researched answer somewhere. Thank you for coming and asking me the question. However, before I answer the question, I need to share some of the basics and fundamentals of Islam with you first, right? This is what don't use the exact words I'm using, but this is a concept that I'm trying to get across to you. Thank you for asking me the question, but before I give you an answer, I need to share some of the basic concepts of Islam first. Why? Because once you understand those core concepts, then you will be in a better position to understand the answer to your question. Now, why is this the case? Okay, I'm going to spend a bit of time explaining why this is the case. Why is it that they need to understand some of the core concepts of Islam first before they are in the position to understand the answer to that question? But before I do that, I'm going to go back to Jamal. Is there anything else, bro?
Yeah, there's a couple more, but there's a question. Brother Muhammad Al-Had, just apologies again if you've been. He said he had actually sent an email into info regarding the problem on the website. So we're going to take note of that, inshallah, and we'll get that back in operation. Yeah. So yeah, just bear with us on that one, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah.
Another question that's come through now. How would we explain to someone that we chose this free will about the covenant we took with Allah before entering the dunya?
How do we explain to someone that we chose this free? Okay, good. That's a good question, and this sort of ties in with what I'm talking about. Well, we can explain it is because this is what Allah mentions in the Quran as well. That Allah, and I'm paraphrasing, that He asked for this covenant from different things, and the humans accepted, this. So it's in the Quran. Now, but here's the thing. Right now, if you just answer that question like that, they're not in the position to accept the Quran as revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's where your problem lies. So this is why, and that's a brilliant sort of segue into what I was talking about. This is why one of the reasons why we need to explain the core concepts, the fundamentals of Islam first, because this will give them the right framework that they need to be able to understand the answers to their questions. Now that's one of the reasons. The second reason is that, remember, everyone has a worldview, right? Everyone has a lens through which they see and understand the world. As Muslims, we have our own lens. We have the lens of Islam. Right, the fundamentals of Islam is our lens. Through this, we understand the world around us. So too is the case with non-Muslims out there. They have their own lenses. Most people today will have a secular, liberal, atheist lens. And therefore, they have their own notions of equality, right and wrong, so on and so forth. So when you give them an answer from your perspective, no matter, like I said, no matter how well you articulate it, they are not going to be satisfied. They are simply not going to be satisfied, because they are going to be perceiving and evaluating your answer through their lens. So what we have to do is we have to share the fundamentals of Islam with them first, which give them a different set of lenses. And at the very least then, they can appreciate why we believe what we believe and why we say what we say and why we articulate the things the way we articulate them, right? So it's about giving them a different set of lenses. And I give an analogy normally, or we give an analogy normally to this is, imagine we're in a room right now, and all of us are staring at a wall, which is white, okay? Excuse me. So we're staring at a wall that's white, and we're all wearing clear glasses, okay? Clear set of lenses. Now, when we look at the white wall through a clear set of lenses, what color do we see it? It's white. Now, imagine I walk in and I'm wearing red glasses, or red tinted glasses. I'm looking at the same wall, but what color do I see? It's red. Now, you could spend all day trying to convince me that the wall is white, but because I see red, you're not going to be able to convince me, right? So what is the best thing to do in that scenario? You have to encourage me to take off my red lenses and put on the clear lenses, and then I will see what you're seeing. And therefore, you no longer need to convince me that the wall is white. So this is an analogy to what I'm saying, which is that everyone has a set of lenses that they see the world through. So when they ask you a question about Islam or something related to Islam, such as these uncomfortable questions, you can articulate them as well as you like. They will never be satisfied, right? And you're going to miss a dawah opportunity. So what you need to do is you need to give them the right set of lenses. How do we do this? Take them to the foundations of Islam. And this is why what I said, and I'll reiterate it again, is that when they ask you a question about Islam, say, thank you for asking me the question. It's a brilliant question. But before I answer it, I need to share some of the basics of Islam with you first. So if you have a couple of minutes, let's sit down and do that. Why do I want to do that? So when you have the fundamentals of Islam, you'll better be able to understand the answer to your question. So that's the best way to address this. And what this does, brothers and sisters, is that this now means you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a sheikh or a scholar or someone that's mastered evolution, as our brother Sabur, who's joining us now. You don't need to understand all of these topics in any great detail. All you need to know is the fundamentals of Islam and how to take control of the conversation, inshallah. Sabur, assalamu alaikum. How are you, bro?
Am I late?
You are, of course you're late. You're late.
Imran, you answered it beautifully. When somebody asks a question and they say, I don't remember taking the covenant. I don't remember Allah saying, am I not your Lord? I don't understand why in Islam a man can marry up to 4 wives and a woman can't marry up to 4 husbands. It goes on and on and on. The simple answer is, well, in order for you to understand why we believe that particular statement, is for you to know why we believe in God, why we believe in the oneness of God, why we believe in revelation, why we believe in prophethood. Teach them our perspective, teach them the lens that we look at the world, teach them the paradigm by which we look at the world. Now, Imran, this way of looking is a paradigm shift in the dawah. This way of thinking, this way of giving dawah is one of the most effective ways. And I loved what you said earlier, which is, if somebody comes up to you and they talk about an issue, and you try and answer their question, when you walk away from them or they walk away from you, have you brought them closer to Allah? Have you told them about Allah's messenger? Have you told them why Islam is true? No, you haven't. You haven't done any of those things. Have you brought them an inch closer to Islam? No, you have not. And interestingly, a lot of dawah conversations are not actually about dawah. What is dawah? The dawah is the call to Allah. It's the call to Allah. It is not to have a discussion about superfluous things. It is not to have discussion about things for which ultimately the only answer is sami'na wa ata'na, hear and obey. And we try and rationalize those things. Anything. Now, every single thing that Allah has legislated, is there wisdom behind that? Yes. Do we know the wisdom? Sometimes yes, sometimes we don't. However, the non-Muslim does not believe in the Quran being the word of Allah. If they believe the Quran is the word of Allah, they'll be Muslim. And since they don't believe, they won't understand those things. Why is it that in paradise, you will, something will happen in paradise, whatever it is. Why? Why is this? Why does hell exist? Why does this happen? Why does that happen? Why is there suffering in the world? Ultimately, the answer to all of those questions is because that's what God decreed. That's what God says. That's what we're supposed to do because we believe in God. Everything goes back to God. So just tell them why we believe in God. Tell them why we believe in oneness and revelation and prophethood. It's a paradigm shift. And Imran, people will, even if they don't accept Islam, they'll understand why you believe in those things. But if you go on and explain, oh, you see hijab, we wear hijab because it does this, it does that. You can have an hour-long lecture. Somebody who comes from a different worldview, they will not accept it.
How would they? Sorry, for some silly reason I put sweet in my mouth.
That's an absolutely absurd thing to do while you are live. So this is the best time to ask you a question. What does the P in the Go Rap stand for?
Prophethood.
Good. Now let's continue. So,
any questions,
some people,
Jamal, by the way?
Questions coming through as well.
Yeah.
Question
what do you
from
think about the
Abdul
problem
B.
of evil?
What do you think about the
What do you think about the problem of evil?
The problem of evil has had answers throughout the times. Who gives the best answer to the problem of evil? Allah does in the Quran. And does the person asking the question believe in the Quran? No, they don't. So if they don't believe in the Quran, you have to prove to them why Islam is true. You have to show them why Islam is true. And to address the problem of evil is not by actually going into the answer, is by explaining why the answer, which is given by Allah, is the best answer. So once we can show that actually the Quran is the word of Allah, then whatever the Quran says about the problem of evil and suffering, it must be the right answer.
And this is exactly where you want to go. So once you've said to them, that's a good question, thank you for asking me, but before I answer the question, if you have a couple of minutes, let me share the foundations of Islam with you first. And you sit down with them and then you go into the Go Rap. But what I wanted to focus on in this live, bro, was dealing with how to transition from any question into the Go Rap. Because that is not only very important as far as taking control of the conversation and making it a dawah conversation, which is productive, but also it does away with the fear most people have when it comes to dawah. Oh my God, what if I get asked these difficult questions? Well, now you know what to do. Whatever question, you don't have to answer that question. Remember, it's not you're not evading the question. Right? You can always come back to it. And if you don't know the answer, say, I'll get you in touch with someone that knows and I'll get you the answer. But what you're really doing is giving them what they want, right? Giving them what they need as opposed to what they want, right? They'll want answers to all sorts of strange questions based on what they're learning online and in the media, etc. But you want to give them what they need. And what they need is the fundamentals of Islam. And that's essentially what the Go Rap covers. God's existence, Allah's oneness, revelation from Allah, and prophethood.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is there anybody watching who would like to ask a question? Because it's so important that we interact with you, we talk to you. We are here to listen to you and to answer your questions. And essentially, dawah is the most important and neglected activity that this ummah has neglected for centuries. Think about it, Imran. For centuries, the Umayyads, what did they do? They went far and wide and spread Islam.
Yep.
And we find that throughout the early years of Islam, you had Muslim preachers traveling from Persia all the way to Central Asia. You had people traveling to Europe. You had people traveling to Sub-Saharan Africa. You had all this dawah happening. And later on, what happened? We neglected this duty. And what was the result of that? The result of that is that Islam did not grow. But we know from a narration of the Prophet ﷺ that Islam will enter every house. So why shouldn't we work towards this noble mission? So the question that we have is, what should the correct behavior to give
dawah
to a hater?
Hater, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I have obviously the standard generic answer is whatever you say to a hater, the hater may come to you and say Sharia law is barbaric, the age of Aisha radiallahu anha was this and whatever, right? You have to go back to the go-rap. So that's obviously clear.
Yeah.
But what is the behavior with a hater? Now, I have a particular way of thinking about this, and you should probably contradict what I'm saying. I think there are so many sincere people out there.
Yeah.
There are so many people out there looking for truth. There are so many people out there who are looking to connect to Allah. There are so many people out there who want to fill the void in their hearts. They have this thirst to have a belief in something greater than themselves because they are empty. Their lives are empty. They're going through depression and nihilism and existential problems and just generally purposelessness in life. These people are the ones we should be reaching. If there's an Islam hater, would I really spend my time trying to convince somebody that's so far away when there are people who are so much closer? There's so much low-hanging fruit. There's so many people who are way more susceptible to be accepting Islam, way more likely to be accepting Islam due to their sincerity. I mean, I'm not saying they don't deserve the dawah, they do. But that's just generally something I find people, they look at the worst case scenario. How do you give dawah to the most difficult person? Well, why don't we start with the easy people that you can give dawah to, who aren't Islam haters?
Yeah.
That's why I'm thinking about.
Overall, I completely agree with what you're saying, bro. You're saying, look, you have limited time. You as a resource are limited. So use your time effectively. That's what you're getting at, basically, yeah? A bit of the 80-20 in there as well, yeah? Principle. But I think if we tie this in with the sort of dawah training context that we do, is obviously initially when you get into a discussion with someone, say doing street dawah, you're not going to know if they're an Islam hater or you're not going to know if they're insincere immediately, right? Yeah. There's a point where you get to, to where you realize, okay, this person's wasting my time.
You had plenty of those in West Ealing, huh?
Yeah, exactly. But there's a point you get there. You don't just do it immediately. Like I can see by this guy's looking at me in a funny way, he's not going to listen. You don't do that. We don't know, right? We don't know what's in their heart. But you'll get to a point where you get there. And at that point, then you make the call, like Subur said, okay, this guy's wasting my time. I'm going to move on to someone that wants to listen. But before you get there, your general behavior towards the non-Muslims should be kind and gentle and compassionate and soft, right? One of the best examples of this, or the best evidences, is in the story of Musa alayhi salam. Now, when Musa alayhi salam is being sent to Fir'aun, and remember the context there, Pharaoh is one of the worst of human beings to have ever lived.
That's right.
Musa alayhi salam is one of the best of humans to have ever lived. So one of the best of humans is being sent to one of the worst of humans, and Allah gives the advice Allah gives to Musa alayhi salam before he goes is speak to him with soft, gentle speech, right? Why? Allah tells us so that, essentially that he may listen, he may understand the message. So a few things we learn from this is, one, there is no excuse to be aggressive towards people generally when we're giving dawah, right? Especially when you don't know what their intentions are, right? Secondly, is that when you are soft and compassionate towards people, you can win over their hearts, right? And that's what we want to do. So there will be cases where you come across people who just genuinely have been misinformed about Islam to the degree where it's led them to feel very aggressive towards Islam and have this hatred towards Islam. They're genuine people out there. But deep down, they're nice people. They've just been led to this conception of Islam. So with such people, you try to work with them and clarify these things. But then you'll also get the people who just genuinely want to have a debate with you, argue with you, waste your time, and that's the only intent. It's like Shaitan has sent them for that reason there at that time, right? So with such people, you'll get to a point where you realize they're just going to waste your time. Then you say, you know what, we're not getting anywhere. Have a nice day. I'm going to speak to someone that's willing to listen. Now, another beautiful thing about what we mentioned earlier, bro, is, you know, where we'd give that concept where, you know, that's a good question about Islam. But before I give you the answer, I'm going to share some of the foundations of Islam with you first. When you do that, if you say that to someone that's just genuinely there to have an argument with you, they're not going to be happy with that.
They're going to walk away.
They're going to be like, no, give me an answer. I want an answer right now. Why should I listen to the foundations? Stick to your ground, because you know why you're giving them those foundations, right? And if they are honest and they understand that it's important to understand the fundamentals of Islam, they will stay. But if they're not honest and they're just there to debate, then in most cases they'll just leave, right? Or the discussion ends there. So that's a good place. It's like a sieve. You know, you put flour in a sieve and the good stuff comes out, and then the, you know, all the big bits stay on top.
Absolutely.
It acts like a really good sieve as well, that approach, inshallah.
And you know, someone walking away from you does not mean that you did not do your duty. It doesn't mean you gave dawah in a bad way. So if someone's like, no, yes or no, does the Sharia law, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, in order for you to understand anything about the Quran or Sharia law, you need to know why we believe what we believe, and you try and do the Quran. Person's like, no, you don't answer my question. And they walk away. You may think, oh, I did something wrong. They walked away. No, the fact is, you were giving the answer. They just weren't willing to listen to the answer, and they wanted to actually have a got your moment. Yeah. Right? So you don't want to give them that. We had another question. How to give dawah to someone who says religion is complicated and denies your dawah, and one has utilized the iERA of a dawah method, but they don't listen. Okay, so if somebody has utilized the iERA way of giving dawah, and let me just clarify, iERA way of giving dawah is probably the wrong way of thinking about it. The idea of going back to the foundations of Islam when explaining Islam is an ancient dawah technique. Yep. When we see the prophets going to their nations, what do they say? They tell people to worship Allah alone. That's it. That's what the go-rap is. The go-rap is there to get you to understand that none is worthy of being worshipped except Allah. That's it. So that method of dawah, if that doesn't work, what do? You don't do anything. You've done your duty. You've conveyed Islam. It didn't work.
The method itself, if you stick to it and you talk about the foundations, you show how simple Islam is. Remember, the beautiful thing about Islam, bro, is to become Muslim, it doesn't take much. Right? There's only a couple of foundational things that you need to understand. And if you understand those and believe those things, you can be Muslim. Right? But to understand Islam completely, that's a lifelong journey. Right? And that's something people spend their entire life studying. But it doesn't require you, Islam doesn't require you to understand the whole of Islam before you become Muslim. Right? All you need to know to become Muslim are the fundamentals. That's how easy Allah has made it. So Islam is very simple. Right? Submission to the will of God. What does that mean? You acknowledge that there is one God, that Allah is uniquely one, and you acknowledge that you were created to worship Him alone. And how do you worship Him alone? You do what Allah has told you to do, and you follow the example of the Prophet.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, that's as simple as that.
Yep.
And you can still spend your entire life studying Islam, and that's an individual choice. Some people study a lot, some people study less. By your own capacity, you do what you can.
Yep, absolutely. So in essence, the answer to this question is you have done your duty when you convey Islam. You've done it. You've spoken about Allah. You've spoken about His Messenger. You've spoken about why Islam is true. You haven't been diverted on these tangential issues. You have given them dawah. Any more questions, Jamal?
We do have more questions. We've actually got quite a few questions. So
good. Brothers, do you have any interesting experiences in disputing with conservative patriot type? I'm kind of stuck with the kinds of people that are very, very common here in Russia.
Yeah, in the UK, we don't get much of that, bro. You know, it's maybe in Speaker's Corner you'll get some patriot types, but in the UK generally people are, you know, they don't really have that type of...
I'm trying to understand what the brother means by conservative patriot type. What does it mean?
You know, like very nationalistic, I think, and, you know, it's about the state, it's about the country. I think that's what...
I mean, I have interacted with those people. I think you have as well.
Not often.
No, not as... Sorry, they're not as often as obviously... It seems like the brother interacts with them.
Yeah. Racist types, yeah, and sometimes the racist types are the patriot types, not always, but specifically patriot types, not many.
Okay, so look, the thing is, any Tom, Dick, and Harry that you come across, you need to give them the go rap.
That's it.
It
yeah.
doesn't matter. Conservative patriot, liberal woke, eccentric scientist, you give them the dawah. You tell them about Tawheed. You tell them about La ilaha illallah, that there's none worthy of worship except Allah. That's it. However, I want you to consider something. What is this whole idea? You know, people get into, you know, okay, I believe in my nation and my nation is so great. We have a 5,000-year history and this and this and this. It's a replacement for religion.
Yeah.
They want something greater than themselves to link them to, which is going to be their lineage and their history and their country and their nation and their state, whatever.
Yeah.
The fact is, that is a superfluous goal. It is ridiculous as a purpose of life, and it's not going to give you any form of happiness. Which nationalist that believes in whatever type of nation, and you know they're very proud of it, and you know, you should be in this country, you should respect our culture and you know our values of this. The fact is, these people, they have tried to replace the traditional religion, the traditional spiritual hunger that all human beings have, with the idea of nationalism. And what we have to simply say is, look, the true way that your hearts find peace is in the remembrance of Allah. The actual purpose of life is not to follow these things. The purpose of life is actually to worship God. So just, you're going to have to give them the go rap. And interestingly, a lot of these conservative type people, they have values that already attract them to Islam. They believe in the institution of marriage. They believe in, you know, the nuclear family. They have these ideas about morality, which are similar to Muslims. So, you know, we shouldn't be put off by these types of people, because they usually are, you know, interested in Islam, not just because of theology. They actually, sometimes they even say this.
Yeah.
That, you know, I know of one conversation I heard between somebody who was far right, very anti-Muslim, and very, you know, doing protests against Islam and stuff like this. I heard him myself say that, you know, his own values, his own conservative values, and that of, you know, people who are similar to him, they actually are in sync with some of the values of Islam.
Yeah.
So, you know, everybody deserves the dawah, whoever they are.
Because conservative.
What do you, read that question, please.
What do you think about New Age atheism now?
I think he means New Age spirituality. What's New Age atheism?
Yeah, I wouldn't give it that label. Don't give atheism that credibility. Honestly, people actually moving away from atheism.
No, but I think he asked New Age isn't that? Couldn't we answer that with New Age spirituality?
Yeah, it's the type of godless spirituality. The type Sam Harris is talking about.
So the godless spirituality.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. People just showing that there's human nature, man. People are designed to worship, submit to some higher being. You know, at uni, I'm doing a module on religious experiences, yeah? And up until now, for the past couple of 100 years, this study has been defined as the study of religious experiences. The word religious has been in there. Now you have the humanists and the atheist types, and they're trying to challenge this. They're not happy. They're like, no, we can't call it religious experiences. We should call it spiritual experiences, because we are non-religious and we have these experiences. So they are fighting for this, right? And this shows that, and even on more of a popular level, you've got people like Harris, you know, Sam Harris, who've written books on waking up and you know, spirituality in the absence of religion and all of this stuff. It's just they know something is missing. They want to have this spiritual fulfillment, and they want to have the cake and eat it too, as they say. Yeah, they don't want to have God, but they want to have spirituality. And to do that, they in many cases redefine spirituality and what it means, and they merely reduce it down to just the, you know, certain chemical firings in your brain and the way that they make you feel, basically. This feeling awe, feeling inspired, feeling happy. That's spirituality for them now. That's how they're defining it. Yeah, but we know traditionally, historically, even by dictionary definition, spirituality fundamentally has always been linked to
God.
God, yeah.
Excellent point. So anybody who is out there, please post your questions. I'm actually going to check the questions on my phone, so I'm not zombie scrolling for anybody who's going to be looking at this. We can actually see the questions live.
He's not zombie scrolling. He's a zombie that scrolls.
He's a zombie that scrolls, yes. So, when speaking to the layperson, they don't know philosophical liberalism underpins most conservative parties. How do you break that down to them? Because conservatives are actually usually traditional.
You don't.
Okay,
You don't break it down.
that's the
for them.
answer. You don't. So, how do you convince somebody who's conservative that their worldview is not in line with liberalism, although they're pushing out liberal ideas? This is exactly what Imran was talking about earlier.
You can't.
Don't get distracted with these things.
You can't, because think about these labels. We may think these labels are well defined, and the people that ascribe to these, that they follow these labels, strictly. They don't. You would be hard pressed to come across an individual who's strictly conservative or strictly liberal.
No, but Imran, the real question here is,
Yeah.
it's even worse than how you're describing it.
Yeah.
The real question here is, if you manage to convince a conservative that actually their worldview is not in line with the liberal ideas that they're espousing, you haven't called to Allah.
Yeah.
You haven't explained why Islam is true. You haven't done the go rap. You haven't given dawah. You've basically wasted your time.
Yeah, of course. Even if you could do that, but you
Unless-
can't. You can't. It's
If
just,
your objective is not dawah, that's fine. Have a conversation. But if your objective is dawah, you have not given dawah. You've simply spoken about that topic.
yeah. And look, Sabur speaks about specific topics, right? So when he goes Speaker's Corner, he will talk about evolution, and he will go into depth with that, with some of these muppets that are there. Yeah.
And that's not dawah.
But no, it is
not dawah.
It may be a certain type of dawah, or something that could be brought to the dawah from one perspective. But generally, when we talk about giving dawah, the
it's
fundamentals, that is not fundamental dawah. It's something that may tie to the dawah in some way, and in the future may link some things for certain people and be a form of dawah for them. But it's not fundamental dawah.
Yep.
Right, which is what which we need to fundamentally focus on first and foremost, right? And then sure, you can specialize in certain areas and within certain, situations, you can go into certain details, but fundamentally stick to the foundations. Get these core concepts across first.
That's right. Any more questions, Jamal?
That's right.
How do I deal with cognitive dissonance when it comes to the Islamic doctrines and what I seem to have understood of reality? I don't really understand that question.
If you had understood the Islamic doctrines properly and the core concepts of Islam properly and fundamental reality the best we can, then you'd realize that there are no contradictions there. So you shouldn't have cognitive dissonance. If you do have cognitive dissonance, it's probably arising for one of two reasons. One, you haven't understood the core concepts of Islam properly and the ideas that we learn, or that you haven't understood reality as we know it in the correct way.
So look, here's one way of actually thinking about it, yeah? In the Quran, there's a mention of a tree that grows in Jahannam.
Yes.
So hellfire has a tree that is growing. The Quraysh found this hilarious. The Quraysh were laughing at this, right? And this Allah describes as a fitna for them, as a test for them. Yeah. The fact is that a tree can actually exist within a volcano if Allah wills. It can.
Yeah.
If Allah wills, then a tree can, as it normally does, just burn when there's fire. So the fact is, somebody comes along and says, the Quran mentions this tree that's growing in Jahannam and that doesn't make any sense, and let's look at the science of this and how is this possible. Maybe we can go to some of the leading botanists in the world and talk to them. Have they ever come across firewood that doesn't actually catch fire and whatever? Fact is, Allah created the tree, Allah created the fire, and if Allah wanted, then the fire doesn't burn the tree.
Yeah.
That's it. So ultimately the question is the Quran the word of Allah? Is the Quran the word of God? That's it.
Yeah.
That's the question. That's all you need to answer.
You know the
you
Quran,
answer that, you're done.
Once you know the Quran is the word of Allah, then what does the word say? The word tells us that Allah is the all-powerful being, the all-knowing being, the being that's able to do all things possible. You understand that? Then miracles aren't a problem, right? And another reality beyond this material reality isn't a problem, right? The thing is, bro, people think they're too clever. Yeah. Oh, we are rational. We can rationally understand everything. We can get to the bottom of everything. No, your cognitive rational faculties have a upper limit. They're limited. They are limited like you are limited as a human being. There's only so far they can go. When we talk about, or when Allah is mentioning another reality to us, He's not mentioning this to us so that we can sit down and you rationalize it fully from our perspective. No, it's to tell us that there's another world coming. It's to inspire us to do what we were created to do here, which is to worship Allah, right? As long as you know Allah is the all-powerful being able to do all things, then He can easily create another reality that exists where human beings don't defecate and they, sweat out through their pores, which is in the form of perfume when they eat, etc. We may not be able to we will never be able to fully understand and comprehend what's out there beyond this physical realm. But Allah's given us enough there to inspire and motivate us, not so we sit down and start to deduce it and to break it down and become reductionists like that. It's arrogance. It's arrogant to think you can understand everything. You can't. And this is where submission comes in, bro. Like you said, the companions, they heard and they obeyed. They submitted, right? We all submit.
And look, brothers and sisters, the GoRap methodology is actually going to help you to understand Islam better as well.
Yeah.
Like you yourself as a Muslim, many Muslims have attended the Dawah training course.
Yeah.
And they've said this is revolutionary.
For themselves, yeah.
This is something that helped them understand Islam better. Because we're so used to this approach of this question's asked, okay, here's the answer. And that answer is never satisfactory because it's not the entire picture. It's just one part of the picture.
Yeah.
And it's so liberating and it's freedom. Because once you understand God's existence, oneness, revelation, and prophethood, you understand why Islam is true. Then whatever Allah says is true. Whatever the Prophet ﷺ says is true. It's just factual. That's it. It's done.
It's true. It's possible. That's it.
You don't have to worry about anything else. And look, Dawah is something that we should all be doing. Dawah is something... Okay, let's just go back to this, Imran. Let's just go back to why are we giving Dawah in the first place? I think because we're talking about the importance of Dawah. We're talking about, the importance of Dawah training. Let's go back to why we're giving Dawah. Okay. Every single human being on this earth, you have a limited lifespan. You have health which is going to deteriorate. You have wealth which is going to disappear. Your youth is going to fade away. And your time is going to go. So all of these finite things are disappearing. What do you want from this short life? You want paradise. Who doesn't want paradise?
Yes.
That's why you're here. You want paradise. And the quickest and the fastest and the most effective way to gain rewards from Allah is by giving dawah. Because when you give dawah, you are doing the job of the prophets, and whoever accepts Islam, they accept Islam because of an effort that you were involved in. 5 years down the road, you happen to be at home, sleeping, knocked out, dreaming about something. And somebody in another part of the world, they are saying the word Alhamdulillah, or the word Bismillah, or they are simply giving charity. But you facilitated them saying La ilaha illallah. You will get that ajr. You pass away. Everybody who passes away, their deeds come to an end, except for a righteous child, beneficial knowledge, and the categories that we know of. And the person who gives dawah, the person who has led people to, he's the means by which people accepted Islam, he will be or she will be in their grave, and they will get continuous rewards day and night for the people that are practicing Islam, because they were facilitated to take Shahada because of their effort.
Yes.
This is something we should all strive for. This is an amazing thing. And hundreds of years ago, even 100 years ago, for you to be involved in dawah, it was incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
You know, people had to travel so far. There was no such thing as dawah organizations. It was a time in which not many people were accepting Islam like they're accepting Islam now. Like the types of the easy locations where we are giving dawah. All of this you can get involved in by supporting the dawah, by learning dawah training, by doing dawah yourself. All of these things Allah has made at your fingertips, so easy for you.
Yes.
So this is a blessing that you should not neglect.
Questions, Jamal?
Guys, we've got lots of questions. I don't even know if we're going to get them all in. There's actually about 17 more questions.
Whoa.
So let's try to answer
night. It's been really good. So I don't know if you want to
maybe
you answer.
So we'll let's go through maybe another 5 to 10, quick as we can, inshallah. Yeah, so quick as we can.
Let me check. Yeah, go and carry
So
on.
is giving dawah obligatory in all places? For example, at work, to those people who you know they are very negatively thinking already about Islam. I mean, should I still try to tell them or leave them? Do the best you can, right? Do the best you can. If you get an opportunity, try to make the most of that opportunity.
Okay, so
But
just
don't overwhelm yourself with thinking that you have to do everything right.
yeah, just
right?
just to point on that, workplaces, from my understanding, professional workplaces like
Most of
offices
them
and
won't
stuff,
be allowed. Yeah.
you are not allowed to preach religion in the UK, from my understanding. Now, if you happen to be working in a different environment, I don't know, you're setting up stages, you are working on a construction site, you're working as a contractor in a firm with freelance design, IT, whatever. Maybe I think under those circumstances you're allowed to give that. So I don't know. But since you said work, that's what came to mind. However, what you will find is naturally, my brother, you will get into dawah conversations. This will happen.
Yeah.
Naturally. Oh, are you fasting? Oh, did you pray? And since they asked the question,
That's it. Yeah.
you can give dawah in a way that, you know, is because if someone says, why are you giving dawah? Well, this person asked me a question. I could just give them an answer.
Yeah. That's
see?
it.
Yeah.
Next, Jamal. I learned that when using philosophical arguments, there will always be someone who is smarter than you and can prove you wrong. Do you agree? If so, how can we then use the Quran or prophetic arguments? Okay. Do you want to deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I don't agree with the idea that you'll always find someone that's philosophically more smarter than you and they can prove you wrong. No, that's not true. And the Quranic arguments, I wouldn't say they're deeply. I mean, I would separate it. I would say the Quranic arguments, the basic arguments that the Quran makes, are profound, simple, and anybody that's sincere, they'll accept them. And whoever's not sincere, they'll try and poke holes and do analysis and this and that. But the fact is, your job is to go for the people who are sincere. And if you give them those basic arguments, anybody that's sincere, whether they're a peasant or a philosopher or a professor, they will accept it. And whoever's not sincere, whether they're a peasant, philosopher or professor, they will not accept it. So it's to do with sincerity, and our job is simply to give the message.
Question from someone potentially needing to know about rap.
So what are these steps? Starting giving dawah with Tawheed, and then so brother, what I'll say, Hilal, is go to training.iera.org
Yep.
and sign up for the free course and just go through the course and it'll all be explained there, inshallah.
Yep.
Opinion on God allegedly being non-binary. I don't know where to start with this, bro.
Let's
move on.
Look, firstly, and I think this is important. Yeah, we in Islam, when we're giving dawah, we should know the basics of Islam, right? It's important to know God, God's attributes, and these things. Anybody who knows that, these sort of questions are just ignore them.
What does that even mean?
They just whatever.
Next, Jamal?
Yeah.
What are the main points about the Prophet ﷺ you would mention to someone who doesn't know anything about him? Please, 104, go to training.iera.org, go through the course. In the prophethood section, you'll find the beautiful, powerful
Liar,
argument that we use,
deluded,
inshallah.
truthful, prophecies, all of that.
And how we
stuff
get
is
to
there,
the Prophet ﷺ as the truthful one,
That's
inshallah.
right.
Right, that's right. You keep saying that's right today. It's almost like becoming your...
That's right.
That's right. How to do dawah in Islam and Muslims hostile environment like in India? Any comments on this?
Okay, so what I would say is, firstly, you never put yourself at risk. You never put your family at risk. You never put the loved ones or your friends and colleagues and other people at risk. Giving dawah in India, from my understanding, is actually pretty difficult. However, certain parts of India are easier than others. I've heard, I could be wrong, that the south is much nicer than the north. Allah knows best. However, I don't think anybody can stop dawah online. Online dawah is happening all the time. And when you're online, you're anonymous in it as well, right? So, people are commenting under news articles, they're having discussions on Facebook. All these youngsters are talking to each other on Discord, right?
What
all
is
this stuff
Discord?
is happening. Yeah, you see, you're a dinosaur like me. You don't know what these young
You're an
ones are
older
up to.
dinosaur, but you know Discord. I don't know what's
Yes,
Discord.
I do. That's because, I try and keep up to date with what's happening on the road. So, when it comes to dawah, there are many, many different ways of doing it. How is it possible that, let's say even in this chat right now, say if you're sitting in India and you're in the chat and somebody comes along and they say, what's Islam about? And you're giving them dawah, you're anonymous, right? So it's fine. But in terms of physical dawah out there on the streets of India, setting up talks, lectures, these things, I've heard a lot of stuff. that actually there's a lot of
Just be
problems.
careful. Look
Yeah.
at your environment and make a sort of a wise assessment, and then go from there.
Go with the low hanging fruit. Do the easy dawah online.
Yeah.
Join the One Reason chat program.
Yes, inshallah.
You know.
Next question might be pertaining to dawah. Maybe the person doesn't feel confident.
How to tackle waswas and being overpowered by
Yeah,
this
that's
waswas,
not
please.
relevant.
We would answer it, but we're short on time, so we're going to get to the
No,
relevant
you wouldn't
questions,
answer even
inshallah.
if you had time, bro.
No, because it could be linked to the dawah.
Okay.
I think it might have been linked to the dawah, like no
Yeah.
confidence to give dawah. So the
Ah,
whispers.
okay. I thought it was like.
Assume the
wudu
best,
or-
brother. Come on.
Next question.
You read it out now, bro.
If it's hard to give dawah in private, how do you propagate the message with a group of people, as it's difficult to access them in private?
Just to talk publicly. Sometimes it's easier public, sometimes it's easier private.
I mean,
every situation is different.
Sometimes you can also create a situation where they start asking you. So it's Ramadan. Chances are, if you're around them and they're eating and you're like, no, I'm fasting. Those conversations happen naturally.
Yeah. And again,
I mean,
training
you
the-
would be surprised. You know, some people, they say, why are you giving dawah? We shouldn't be giving dawah. You don't have knowledge to give dawah. You know, there's something, obviously we can say convey from me, even if it's one verse, as the Prophet ﷺ said, you just need to know the basics, simple go rap, stick to what you know, don't talk about what you don't know. Okay, those answers are there, but there's also something else to be said, Imran. Dawah conversations are happening anyway. They're just happening badly. People are being asked about Islam anyway, and they're not trained. And so they're giving poor answers. The fact is, it's happening already. So you just have to learn how to convey Islam.
Yeah, training.iERA.org, guys. Go there. It is a phenomenal course to get started in the dawah.
That's
Go
right.
through that, inshallah. That's right.
One for you, Sabor.
Can Darwinism, let me read it for you. Can Darwinism and the common ancestor be refuted?
My brother.
I study medicine. Let me finish, bro. I study medicine, and many doctors teach it to us.
Yes, my brother. Now, let me give you an answer to this, yeah? Firstly, if anybody believes in Darwinian evolution, they believe in string theory, they believe in whatever, you could still give them go rap.
Yeah.
Go rap is independent of any doubt they have about Darwinism or whatever it is. You don't even need to talk about Darwinism.
Yeah.
Technically, you can go straight and explain to them why God exists. Evolution has nothing to do with that. Oneness of prophethood, evolution has nothing to do with that. Revelation and prophethood, evolution has nothing to do with that. And now that Islam is true, when you can show someone Islam is true, anything that may contradict Islam, whether it's some historian claiming Musa alayhi salam didn't exist or Isa alayhi salam didn't exist, or some guy talking about the origin of life coming randomly, or anything that supposedly contradicts Islam, because we've shown Islam to be true, all of those things can be pushed aside.
Yeah.
That's a very simple way of doing it.
Yeah. And if you want detailed answers, you go to Sabur's channel. He's got stuff on evolution.
I don't think we're allowed to do those plugs, bro.
I just.
But thank you anyway.
Yeah, they know you got a YouTube channel,
that's
man.
fine.
Come on.
That's
Sabur has
fine.
a YouTube channel.
That's fine.
So specifics, but again, that's not the main focus
I
of
have
the
to take
dawah.
up this violation to management.
You can thank me
the-
later for promoting your channel. And then acting like you don't want me to do it.
There have been
Exposed.
so many wonderful questions. I'm just trying to get the last couple for you because let me see. They've been really, really good. We should try to answer all these questions maybe even afterwards. How can okay, I don't know. Maybe one of you might want to tackle this one here.
How can an immaterial God give matter to the universe? Again, go to training.iera.org, and if you go through the course in the arguments for God's existence, you'll see why that's the case, inshallah.
Okay. I think, yeah, there's some salams from the brothers.
Wa alaikum salam.
I think that's pretty much it, really, in terms of questions.
That's right. Is that right, Sabur?
I think that's right.
That's right, Jamal. There's no more. Do you want to summarize this and wrap it up for today?
Sometimes we think you have to overload yourself with information in order to be effective. And the fact is, the basic ideas are the ideas that shape the world. The basic ideas are the most important ideas. The idea of the go rap, some people can do the training and be like, oh, what? In just like they attend, say, a 1 day training or whatever, and they both like, oh, like, that's it. That's all the training you do. But there's this other course which goes over every question, you know, why 4 wives, why this, why that, and each question has like hours of answers and notebooks. And why is this method so simple? The reason why this is so simple is because this is the shortest way of giving dawah to people.
This is the best
It's
way.
the easiest way of giving
It
dawah
goes
to
to the
people.
fundamentals.
And look, I want anybody, you call it go rap. Before this, Sheikh Abdul Rahim used to call this the foundational method, right? When he was doing his dawah training back in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. I remember him calling it the Islamic foundations. Other people may have called it something else, say 50, 60 years ago. The idea of taking any question about Islam and linking it back to Allah is an ancient idea. It's ancient. It doesn't go back to us. It doesn't go back to iERA. It's an ancient idea. It's the idea of taking people back to Allah. The prophets came to their nation again and again in the Quran. We see Nuh alayhi salam and his nation, Lut alayhi salam and his nation, Musa alayhi salam and his nation, Ibrahim alayhi salam and his nation. And what did they say to people? Worship Allah alone. Worship
right.
Allah alone.
Yeah.
Look at the dialogue between Musa alayhi salam and Pharaoh. Yeah. Pharaoh is throwing these curveballs, saying this, saying that. Didn't you kill this man? Didn't you do this? Didn't you do that? All this. Look at Musa alayhi salam, the Lord of the East and the West, the Lord of you and your forefathers. And again he goes in that conversation in Surah Taha, back to Allah, back to Allah. Everything Pharaoh says, Musa alayhi salam takes his question and links it back to Allah, links it back to Allah's greatness. So he is fixated on the goal of giving dawah.
Yeah. Yusuf alayhi salam is another example, bro.
Exactly, the prisoners.
Yeah. They wanted dream interpretations.
And what do you
linked it
do?
back to the oneness of Allah.
Oneness
Yeah.
of Allah. Exactly. Excellent example. You should do live streams. So we are here to just remind people of the Quranic paradigm. The Quranic paradigm is so simple, so profound, and so powerful. What does it tell us? Worship Allah alone. Take any question and link it back to Allah. And that is the iERA Dawah training course, which you can get from training.iera.org.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us today. This live stream was brilliant. Imran, any concluding words?
No, that's right, bro. We can leave it at that, guys. Jazakallah khair. We'll
Fantastic. So
join you
until
week,
next time,
inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.